Hello, class. Today we'll be talking about the reading process as we look at Chapter 5 in Total Literacy and also some related chapters in Tompkins' book. And my question for you is, what is reading? And I'll be sharing with you my definition of reading. And as a byproduct of what you read and what you already know, you'll be coming up with your definition of the reading process that you'll be sharing with me in the class during this module. So let's move into it. And I'll start off by sharing with you that I think that the model of reading that is usually taught in schools and is talked about is probably too narrow. And I'll go back to the 20th century and talk about a very influential constructionalist named Spencer. And Spencer said that real reading is primary reading, and that the reading we have in books is secondary reading. By primary, he didn't mean with small kids. He meant that it's primary, it's central, it's the main thing. And so I will agree with him, and that is that when you walk outside and you see a beautiful morning, you're reading nature. I think that when you go to an art gallery and you see a beautiful piece of work by Van Gogh, then you're doing primary reading, and that is that you're reading your environment, you're comprehending holistically. And so I think Spencer's view of primary reading is central to what I'm going to be talking about this week as we look at reading and what it really means and how we can be the most effective reading teachers. First of all, let's go back to the very first week of the course where we talked about three learning theories. And you remember one was nativistic, that we learn naturally. And of course, I think that's part of what Spencer's talking about. Uh, uh, we also had behaviorism, like Skinner, but we also had something called cognitive field. And that's really the branch I come from. And that is that I think we really need to learn holistically, but a teacher can take the whole and from the whole look at the parts. And one way that we do this in early childhood is an approach called the language experience approach. It's in your chapter, but of course the father of the language experience approach was my mentor at the University of Arizona, and the first author of the Total Literacy book, and his name is Rich Van Allen. Van Allen first came across the concept of language experience in a practical sense. He had been a professor of literacy, reading, if you will, at Southern Methodist University, SMU, in Dallas, Texas. And he liked what he was doing. He was training teachers, but he was upset when the football coach at SMU was paid more to quit than Van had been paid his entire career. And a phone call came that night from the superintendent in the Harlingen Independent School District. Harlingen is on the Texas-Mexican border, and he offered him a job to come as his curriculum coordinator or assistant superintendent for instruction. So Van went. When he got there, he found, of course, that it was a total ESL population, and the instruction in the school was English, but all the kids spoke Spanish as their home-rooted language. They also scored about the fifth percentile on all the national standardized tests, of course, because they were taking a test in a language that was not their own. So Van went into kindergarten, first grade classrooms, and he came up with a novel idea, and that was to listen to kids. And he would take the language of the kids and make stories. What you call that? Dictation. So he would listen to a child, he would write down, put it on a chart paper. As he was writing it down, he would name the letters of the alphabet, and he would call the words as he put them in. And then later he would read the story back with the kids, and then the kids would read the story to him. And so from that, we came up with what we call the language experience approach. And here is the theory of it, and that is children can talk, and what they talk about can be written down. What is written down can be read by others and by them. So that's really what literacy is. Literacy is talk written down. And so from that, Van created a very successful program in Harlingen. Of course, kids never scored 90% on the percentile rank, but they moved it to 30% and they became readers of English. And they did that through the exploration of the English language through the language experience approach. And I think LEA, as it's called, is still a great way for kids to move into the literacy process and become readers when they're 5 and 6 years of age. The other thing we need to talk about is what access do kids have to print? In our book, we talk about 3 cueing systems. Tompkins talks about 4 cueing systems. So let's talk about those cueing systems. It's the graphophonic system, it's the semantic or meaning system, and the syntactic or grammar system. They use all 3 of these as they read, and together they're very powerful. Any of them by themselves is not as good. And so that's why we call this total literacy, and that we want to bring all of the tools that kids have to the reading classroom. So you'll read about that this week, both in my book and the Tompkins book. And we'll ask you a question on a blog about what is the difference between the four cueing systems and the 3. To me, the semantic definitely involves the context of the situation and all the things that Tompkins talks about. So I'm staying with 3, but you can have 4 if you want, or maybe even 5. It's up to you. We also have a very interesting piece with a focus on the graphophonic system, because generally I think that schools get phonics wrong. I think that they try to teach sound relationships before the kids are conceptually ready for it. And I think there's a better way. And I've tried to do that throughout my career by providing books for kids that are predictable, rhyming, and I think this rhythm and rhyme is really what makes reading easy. But in this chapter, we have included a section featuring a first grade teacher named Kim Henderson, and it's onset and rhyme. So that's really what Bill Martin did with his books. It is what I do with my books, and of course it's what Dr. Seuss did with his books. So we have put together 4 videos from Kim's classrooms where she talks about how she brings kids into the graphophonic system from whole to part by looking at words and the sounds within the words instead of trying to make letters into words, which is synthetic phonics. And so I think that the onset and rhymes will be videos worth your watching this week. We also talk about reading as transaction, because we're not robots. We're not just repeating someone else's language. Marie Rosenblatt wrote a very influential book called The Reader, the Text, and the Poem. And I think that if you look at it, it's true. That's how reading works. I'm a writer. When I write something, when it goes into print, it no longer is mine. It becomes the child's or the reader's. And what we mean is that when someone reads it, they have their interpretation. They see it through their background of experiences. They see it through what they love. They see it through their passion. And they create a script in their mind that is the poem, as Rosenblatt calls it. And that is the reading transaction. And that is that reading belongs to the reader and not the author. And so therefore, for us to think that readers should replicate exactly what the author said, it's just not going to happen. And so I encourage you to read more about Rosenblatt and the reader, the text of the poem. But that leads me to a part of that whole process, and that is miscue analysis. Miscue analysis, of course, originally developed by Yetta Goodman. It's a very powerful research tool because it allows us to see what's happening in the reading transaction with kids. I've used it in some of my own research. It's very powerful. But maybe you've read some of the propaganda that says there's no such thing as a miscue. Okay, here's a challenge for you. I want you to take out a book that you love, maybe it's a novel you're reading right now, and I want you to turn on the app on your iPhone or Android, and I want you to push it, and I want you to read for about 4 minutes, okay, out loud. And then I want you to replay it and read the text silently and listen to your voice, and guess what? You're going to have numerous miscues, because once again, in the reading process, your eyes pick up the words and they go into your mind, and your mind helps you comprehend based upon your experiences, and that's your transaction. And the poem you create is what you're really reading. And so when you look at the tape version, you're going to find it varies from the author's version, because that's how miscues occur. And miscues indeed are good because they show competence in the reading process. Let's talk about one more thing before we move into your studying and reading this week, and that's schema theory. The United States put a lot of money into the Center for the Study of Reading at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign back in the 70s, and there's a lot of monographs, research on the reading process. They tended to research it from a cognitive psychologist view instead of a teacher education view, which was good, because it expanded our knowledge of the reading process. And when we understand the reading process more, it means that we have a different view of it and a more accurate view. So schema is our knowledge of the world and how we understand the world. Schemata would be one instance of that. So when we're talking about schema theory, we basically are helped through the semantic cueing system when we're reading by what we know about something. There are a lot of examples of the book. I'll let you take a look at that. But definitely the broader picture that we need to develop within kids is their schema, their background experience. So that's why we take field trips to the art museums. That's why we go to the zoo. And I'll end on one humorous note. We took a kindergarten class to a dairy farm, and guess what? My mama had a baby, and that's what the kids wanted to talk about. And so it became an enrichment for their schema as they understood the beginning of life. And sure enough, they wanted to talk about it. They wanted to dictate to their teachers their experience that day. And so literacy, we need to widen how we look at literacy. We need to look at literacy as life and go back to Peter Spencer's view of primary reading and try to enhance the experiences of kids. When we do that, we will then enhance their ability to read and how they approach reading. So let's have a fun week in this class, and I look forward to your input and our discussions together. Let's go for it.